So thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm absolutely excited that this is quite interdisciplinary session because it's not just about accounting. We have colleagues from different disciplines in the room. So today we'll talk about integrating software skills, or not so soft, into education. So there'll be plenty of discussion on this area. And the plan for today, we will start from a fire talk question-answer session for about possibly, 20 minutes, where Judith and I will ask questions to Anna, and then of course after that you will have an opportunity to ask questions as well. But before that, I would like to say that it's my great pleasure to welcome in Lincoln Anna Howard, who is the Senior Manager of Academic Initiatives, AICPA&CIMA US. And before we go with our fire talk questions and everything interesting, I would like to invite the Head of Department of Accounts, Finance and Economics, Siobhan Goggin, to say a few words and welcome Anna to Lincoln.
Hello, Anna. Whilst we're waiting.
Hi.
Very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too.
Yeah, Nadia has told me a lot about you.
Oh.
So, being the head of department, as I am, I'm Siobhan Goggin, head of Department of Accountancy, Finance and Economics. I get all the best jobs to do, one of which is to welcome people like yourself. And I've just been looking at your bio, and I'm so glad that eventually we've managed to persuade you to come to the UK, because I think you've been everywhere else except the UK. So it's great that you're here, and particularly that you're here in Lincoln, because Lincoln is a beautiful, small city, but is often missed as visitors come to the UK. So we're delighted that you're here, and then you can go back and extol the virtues of the real Lincoln. Yeah, so it's a wonderful city. So do try and, if you can, see a little bit of it whilst you're here. So it gives me great pleasure to offer you this just small token of thanks for making your way here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Just hope it still works. Okay, so shall we? Yeah, just shake hands again.
I feel like President Biden.
No, not yet. I'll give you a few years. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
For visiting
kind.
the University of Lincoln in particular. So I'll now hand back to Nadia.
Nobody says no to Nadia. When she says you're coming, you're coming.
Right. So enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ma.
Bye.
Very nice.
Right, so I would like to introduce more formally Anna Howard. And Anna Howard is the Senior Manager of Academic Initiatives, AICPA&CIMA US, as I mentioned. She's an accomplished accounting and finance professional with strong international focus, if you've seen her CV and biography and everything. She holds a degree in accounting from the University of Massachusetts, and an MBA with a global business from Clark University. She started her career as an associate of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Anna's expertise extends to corporate accounting, where she also worked in a fast-growing high-tech manufacturing company. She collaborated with international accounting groups, developed policies, corporate reporting, and her work in consolidations, management accounting, and also internal control took her to several countries, sharing her expertise, and she delivered training over the last many years in different countries, including Germany, Italy, Russia, South Korea, China, and Japan. And as Siobhan mentioned, we persuaded Anna to come to Lincoln. And I also should say that Anna's passion to teaching led her to join firstly Nichols College as a faculty member, where she served as the Director of Master of Science of Accounting program. And her also diverse experience positioned her as a sought-after expert in accounting and finance education. But I would extend this to business as well in general. And her recent work with AICPA&CIMA also provided her an opportunity to work with international colleagues across the world in terms of business education. And I think that's all from me. And I'm happy to hand over to Judith for our first questions.
Okay. So Anna, I'm going to ask because I'm sure a lot of us in this room will really want to know, because what Nadia has given us is a little bio. But I want to talk about your current role as Senior Manager of Academic Initiative, because everyone here, maybe a few, are not academics. And when we see academics, we get interested. So can you provide a brief overview of your role as AICPA Senior Manager of Academic Initiative?
Sure, thank you. I started with AICPA 3 years ago. This month, I actually just celebrated my third anniversary after serving in academia for about 5 years. And my role is to be a outreach from the professional organization that we are, because we have almost 700,000 members around the world between AICPA and CIMA. So all the professional accountants, they want to tell the academics the skills that are required in the students that are coming out of universities. So the skills that are needed in the current environment. So my job really is that outreach, and I do it through several venues. Maybe some of you know we have a monthly webcast where we bring practitioners and academics. We call it Faculty Hour. And we go to conferences, we do visits to schools as well. So this is a perfect combination of my professional experience. And as you mentioned, for 20 years, I was a corporate accountant, I was an auditor. And then for the 5 years, I was teaching accounting and audit. So I know a little bit the pain points of the professors too. I remember having difficulties there, so I know what the professors are going through as well. So we kind of meshed those two skills together, and I love what I do now.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
That you did mention your career in audit and corporate finance, which is going to lead up to my next question. So I would like to know, because sometimes, especially for our students, even staff, when we want to transition from one role to another, it's easier to say I'm moving from one university to another, but you're coming from your role in audit and corporate finance to an academic to then your current role with the professional body. So how did you do it?
Oh my goodness, that was a coincidence, really. Like everything happened. So after having 11 years at IPG Photonics, that was the fiber manufacturer, fiber laser manufacturer, that where I served in the financial reporting and management accounting and board reporting role, I decided, I had a baby who just was running around here, and I decided to step off, and I decided not to do anything for 2 years. That's what I thought for a second. And then I went to a women's conference in Massachusetts, and I met the woman who said, so you're a CPA, because, that's the credential that we usually have, the highest credential in accounting in the US. And I said, yes. And she said, so what are you doing with your CPA? And I said, I'm retiring. And she said, well, we need a CPA to teach a class. Would you be interested? And I thought, well, maybe one class, it can keep me occupied while I'm chasing the 5-year-old. And then it was another class, and then it was another class. And then when I was teaching those classes, because I just came out of the corporate finance, I told the woman who hired me that she needed to update her curriculum because it was stale. I said, you're not teaching the skills that we are using anymore. So a year later, she said, well, you become a director and you rewrite the curriculum of our master's program to what you think is fit. So it was just really, they gave me a chance based on my passion for the profession and based on the skills that I brought right from the professional experience. I knew nothing about writing curriculum, so I took a course online how to write curriculum and how to do instructional design. And then I got together with several employers from Boston, because we're we were a college in Massachusetts, and most of our students were getting hired by Boston firms. So I said, all right, I could design the curriculum based on what I think they should know, but it should not be just what I think they should know. So essentially, I did my small survey of our employers, and we designed the curriculum together. So I brought the employers to campus, and we said, we had long meetings, we had, we fought, we discussed. And what was interesting, bringing us to the next topic, is that they said, I have full freedom to design a Master's of Accounting curriculum. What do you want it to be? And they said, don't do all technical accounting. Don't do all technical accounting. We have half of technical accounting, half people skills. And I said, what? Masters of Accounting should. So this way we started kind of incorporating what we are talking about, right? There is, you call them soft skills. We now call them power skills, leadership skills, life skills. We had to create for these employers courses specifically focused on topics that we consider other than technical skills. We had critical thinking course in our Masters of Accounting. We developed a course called Negotiation and Conflict Resolution for Accountants. We had an employee motivation course. So there were additional courses in addition to advanced accounting, in addition to accounting research that we had to develop because employers wanted them.
Thank you. And that actually brings me to the next question, because you mentioned about your corporate reporting and how you integrate it in there. But can you think about some examples? How has your experience in reporting, in corporate reporting in the business world actually influenced your work in academia?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one transition, we're talking about transition from corporate to academia. Corporate is very short-term focused. It's very quick moving, very deadline driven in terms of financial reporting. So I am quick work, and academia moves a little slower and decisions are made a little longer and everything has to go through a committee. And so what I brought, and I think that's why I got hired as director, because I could get things done very quickly, and make an executive decision in terms of, this is a risk, we'll take that risk. If it's a wrong decision, I'll take the fall for it. But sitting around doing nothing is not a course of action, right? So let's go with what we know. If we know something better, a year from now, we will adjust our course. So, and that's what we started to do. I'm like, let's pilot this. Let's see how it works. So 3 years ago, we piloted that program. And it still runs. I already left college, but the program I designed still runs. And the employers send all of their new hires through the master's program in that college. And now I just heard anecdotally that the CEO of the company that helped me design it, he's getting his master's in the program we designed together. So those kind of things that action-driven, kind of action, business-like thinking, I think helped me design that program faster than I would have. And when I was teaching, what helped me is that I realized how uncertain things are in real business. Like, when you teach an accounting program, you have this known and you give them this number and you give them this number, and then they have to put it in the formula and figure out what happens there. But when you're in corporate world, you do not know what the interest rate is. You do not know what volatility is. So you have to make a lot of assumptions, and that's where the critical thinking comes in. You have to process a lot of data to find out what are the assumptions that are going into that problem, because nobody's going to give you this is a given, this is a given. No. What interest rate should we use for this Black-Scholes model? We don't know. What is the volatility? We do not know. So how do you figure that out? So there was a lot of uncertainty that I had to explain to the students, that you are going to make some guesses, and some of them will be wrong. Again, it goes to, you have to just make the best judgment, go with it, and then if you know better, you will do better.
Okay, that leads me to the second question, because I'm going to ask, we've talked about from an employer's perspective, which is fine, but I'm going to ask you now, how has your experience informed your understanding of the needs and expectations of students? Because this is one, we know what the expectation of employer is. Like you said, when you were designing this curriculum, there was consultation with that. But when it comes to students, how do you fathom, how do you know what they want and what their expectation is for a whole degree? Because sometimes students come into a program not knowing where they want to go or where they want to be. In your curriculum design, how do you include that, and what informed your decisions or the choices that you've made?
So at the time, the master's program that I was designing was being designed for working professionals. So I had a persona in my mind of what my student will be like. And several of my colleagues from the company I work with became my students after I designed that program. So I knew they have families, they have full-time jobs, so they need flexibility. They need to be able to get a hold of the faculty when they're doing homework, not when, when the faculty is available. Right? So flexibility was one of the biggest things for working adults. So we designed this course before COVID hit. We had a hybrid model. So I was teaching a class with cameras pointing at me. So a person who just came from work could sit there, or they could turn in from home on Zoom. We were using Zoom in 2015, right before people used Zoom. So this way they had the flexibility. If they want to ask me questions after the class, they come into class. If they have a baby or dog to feed at home, they go home and Zoom in and see me. So flexibility was one of the big things. Since Zoom, there is a different persona of students, right? We have, it's kind of funny to me, but I also feel bad for people growing up and missing those 3 years of socialization that are required for human being to be formed. Kind of missing that, and what we call now in our circles is delayed adolescence. So we have people who come in without any basic social skills, and you have to, I hear from Deloitte and EY that they have students coming in and staying off camera during Zoom meetings, or being under a blanket during Zoom meetings, like basic things, or they have to say you cannot vape while you on camera with your employer or during the interview. So basic skills like that are missing, but you have to be able to do that. So there are two personas, the young ones and the working professionals, and there are different needs for all. So I think you have to kind of create personas of your students and focus your curriculum around each.
Okay, and I'm going to ask, because this is just a recent research by the Quality Assurance for Higher Education here in the UK, the survey of graduates. So their survey was on graduate and employer, and it shows deficiency in key areas such as oral and written communication, collaborations and teamwork, critical thinking, and intercultural capability. So my question to you is, do you agree that these are key areas that we need to develop? Or do you think there are specific, because sometimes it's all okay to generalize it, but do you think there are specific competencies and soft skills that you think you consider essential for graduates, in particular accounting professional, to develop?
Yeah, it's not just me who, those results I've seen other, in other studies too. Our employers are telling the same thing, critical thinking. From being fresh out of corporate, I know that having a good command of English, and I'm not a native speaker, we're not native speakers, so we take good care of our English grammar, but some native speakers do not. And I turned down proposals that had that grammar in them, or a wrong apostrophe, because I thought to because I used to hire auditors in my corporate job, and we used to have proposals coming in, and based on the emails I would get, I would decide what kind of auditors I'm going to hire. So at some point, you're losing $500,000 deal because your managers are not careful with their English in the email. So I told my students that you have to be careful with your English. So those written communications, I always pressed on. I said, you're going to lose clients if you don't take care of your English in written communications. Oral communication is the next level as well, because you have to be able to tell stories based on the financial data you receive, to explain it to somebody who is not as financial. I feel like my career in corporate finance took off the day I was able to explain to the board of directors the material misstatements that were found in our internal audit. So when I was able to explain to non-financial people what internal controls are and how they affect financial statements, everybody started paying attention to me and said, oh, I think she knows what she's doing, because you have to have an ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms. So I sat next to the director and I said, so look here, you're looking at the screen and you're pointing at this to the internal auditor and you're seeing this number, and he's like, oh, I get it. And then, that's when it kind of took over. So that's when I say soft skills are usually power skills, because they enable you to move up, they enable you to succeed in your position. Now it's beyond technical skills. You have to understand the technical stuff too, right? You have to be able to understand what you're talking about, but explain it to people who did not major in finance, accounting, and economics. That's a whole new level.
And you mentioned about success already a little bit, but how do these skills and the ability to explain complex concepts, how does this help to succeed for students in the long term?
I think that gives them exposure, that gives them opportunities, that gives the leadership notices you when you're able to explain and you're able to present and you're able to explain complex or something unfamiliar to them in simple terms. So I think all of that definitely promotes you within the organization or in other organizations as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So if this is a question, because our student will be interested in this one. So because you've worked in corporate before. So when it comes to core competencies and soft skills, have the industry expectation evolved? Did you think it has changed from when, with your current experience now, from when you worked there to what it is? Do you think that the expectation around competency has changed?
Absolutely. Even in my short lifetime, I guess, not short, but 30 years ago, 25 years ago, when I got hired by PwC, I had to be a good little soldier and do what I am told. And I was very good at that. So you go there and ask this and get this number and put it here and report on this. And that's what you did for the first 2 years, right? And then maybe you will get more responsibility, you will get to maybe make some decisions. So what is happening now, all of that good soldiering is done by either AI or robots or automation. So as soon as you come in, fresh out of college, I remember myself with the class of my fellow auditors looking at each other. Do you know what you're doing? No. Do you know what you're doing? No. You kind of floundering for the first 2 years. But now there is expectation of them to make executive decisions, to do the data storytelling, to analyze what they're seeing and find the anomalies, right? Before we used to spend time inputting data just to see what it comes out. Now data is already there, anomalies pop out at you, and I'm talking about audit mostly, and you have to be able to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. So those critical skills that you used to have about 5 years to develop while you're in academia are expected from you in the first, second year. So this is a shift within 25 years, which seems like a short period of time to me.
But how do we as academics should develop our academic programs to enhance students' work readiness or their skills development in our curriculum?
I have a couple of examples. One thing that I did when I was teaching in the MBA course, they asked me to teach cultural awareness in global business. By the way, that's intercultural awareness. That there was a required course in our MBA because Nichols College want every MBA to have a global perspective. So I was teaching the course, Cultural Awareness in Global Business, and we had a group project. By the way, group projects make them talk to each other, although they don't want to and they hate it, but you make them talk to each other. But what I did there, for each group, I assigned one of my global controllers or global friends, colleagues, as a mentor, which they had to get input from. So they had to actually schedule a meeting, a Zoom meeting with that person in the Netherlands or South Korea or India. So basic things like considering time difference and considering, asking questions about that gave them a perspective on what global work is like. And, you're talking to somebody from a different culture and how do you communicate with them? Should you be on time if it's a person from the Netherlands? Should you be a little late if it's a person from another country, right? What is the time perception like? What is the power perception like? When it's a colleague from Germany, you have to be more formal than if it's a colleague from the US. You can call a colleague from the US by their first name. From Germany, you probably will not. You will, do a Mr. or another, address. So those kind of like real life scenarios help the students. What another colleague did, and I'm going to have him on faculty hour, which is our webcast in September, because I loved what he did in his class. He brought his, partners from Deloitte. He formed these teams of students and they had to go through the whole audit program. And again, sorry for non-audit people there, but one of his capstone cases was they had to go through the whole audit program and write memos like they would to a partner. And the real partner from Deloitte would read their memos and give them feedback. So throughout the whole semester, it was again practice with the real partners. What is it going to be like? What is that communication like? Don't be late delivering that to me because that's already, if you deliver it late twice, you are fired from Deloitte, right? Because there's a line of people standing at the door. So those kind of like bringing the practitioners into the curriculum, I think that provides a special angle to the whole material.
And that brings us to the next area in terms of integrating skills development into education. And in Lincoln, we are specifically committed to life-enhancing education experiences for our students. We just recently launched teaching and learning strategy where we talk about life skills and how to develop this. And you mentioned about global, which is my next question. So how do we empower students to become creative graduates and with this inclusive mindset and global inclusive mindset and also a strong sense of personal and social responsibility?
I think it starts with you because you're in front of them. So it starts with being a good role model and being conscious of it, because there is the big concept in United States right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're looking at all the textbooks because even in the problems in the textbooks, you might have Mr. Smith bakery. Well, there are not just Mr. Smiths in the United States. There's Kitanya, and there's Yakimoto, and looking at the names that are used in your problems is already like a first step to making the world bigger. So one of the things that we're looking at is how the textbooks are making assumptions in the textbooks. Another thing that we are pointing out is the names, pronouncing the names people want to be pronounced. I worked for a company where our Korean colleagues all had American names to make it easier for us. And to the point where I said, what's your real name? I can spend a second learning your real name just to show you that I care, right? To show you respect. So that's how we start within the classroom. That's how we start with each other. And bringing up the not so easy topics where you can show the humanity, where you can show empathy. I think it all starts with us as well. I was talking about, I think, again, in my international class, I was talking about sanctions, and, I brought personal stories, and I was in tears at some point because it affected somebody I knew. So bringing your whole self to the classroom is what opens it up.
Thank you. And we talk about integration of soft skills competencies into academia, but how would you judge that this has been done effectively? So what does it mean, an effective integration of competencies and soft skills?
It's hard to assess, right? I think that's the trouble with it. How do you assess whether they are an open
Effectively
person,
integrated.
effectively integrated? So you do your best. But in terms of communications, I think you can do some assessments there. There's, presentations is pretty easy to assess, and written communication is as well.
Somebody's smiling there because he's not sure about that.
We'll open it up for debate. We'll open it up for debate.
Yeah.
So not all of them you have to assess, but some of them, like critical thinking, yes, you can assess. Digital mindset, yes, you can assess. Like innovation mindset. There are ways, and that's why I think we are coming together to brainstorm those ideas and see who has done it. Again, do it. If it doesn't work, do something else. But don't just sit and think about it for years.
Okay. My next one I'm going to ask. I read something recently where there was a debate between what the institution thinks the industry should help students develop. So we feel like we train them, then we give them to you, you allow them to develop those skills. And the industry feels that, no, as a university or as an institution, you need to help your student develop these skills. So there's a conflict there between who should do what. So my question is, how do you think the academic institution like the University of Lincoln will be able to collaborate with industry to ensure that the curriculum aligns with the evolving needs and demand of the profession?
Again, examples from other schools, because I speak to a lot of schools. I just spoke to one that has formed alumni, the people who graduated from their college. They brought them back as an advisory board, but they have 2 advisory boards. That was cool. Like, I know a lot of departments that have an advisory board, but these guys had 2. One is a senior advisory board, and one is a junior advisory board. That junior advisory board was of recent 2-3 year alumni. So people who just graduated, that just stepped into the corporate world, and they're looking back and saying, what? I should have known this. So they can come back to you 2 years later and say, I wish I learned this and I wish I learned that, right? People on the senior advisory boards are the partners in firms or leaders or business owners. They are the ones hiring them, so they can provide a different perspective. But the junior advisory board is definitely, I thought, was a great idea. I never heard that before, and I thought I'm going to tell everybody from now on, Junior Advisory Board. And then ask them too, we do a lot of employer surveys as well, and right now I get to do it on a national basis. I have a lot of data, like access to a lot of people. When I was a small college in Massachusetts, very tiny small college, I did my own survey, right? I went to the employers and I said, all right, you got 10 classes, what are they going to be? Sometimes it's that simple. And that's when they said some of the technical skills, we can teach them on the job, leave them to us, prepare them to step into a partner role, into a partner role with the customer as soon as they come to us. So they're not afraid to go to a customer-facing job.
And that brings us to the next topic of collaboration as well, educators. So in terms of AICPA, what are some initiatives you could give examples how AICPA can support educators in terms of resources, classroom resources, and just integration of these skills into the curriculum?
Oh, it's my job, so I'm so glad you asked. There is only a few of us at the AICPA&CIMA. I know CIMA has a different side, and you have been very involved with them, so that's great. And what my job is that I can bring speakers to the classroom because we have over 1 million members, right? Forensics, yes, right? We have specialists in forensics. We have specialists in cybersecurity. So those we have specialists in ESG, right? Environmental governance and social and governance. So we have these speakers who are itching to come into the classroom and talk to students because they have to do it for their job too. So that counts in their portfolio as service as well. Then what I'm trying to do in my job is do the best practices like this. I heard this guy from somewhere, I think East Kentucky, brought his Deloitte partners and created this course. I said, come, let's tell 500 educators, because that's what usually our audience is about 500 educators at the webcast. I said, let's tell everybody what you did, so maybe somebody will pick it up and do that. We trying to provide the forum for best practice sharing. And then if somebody comes up with a cool idea, such as, oh, here's an activity that will probably make everybody love taxes in their classroom, I would post that activity on our website and I would promote it again to everybody in the world. So that's kind of where I get the advantage. I can scale it up, right? So you don't have to create the same activity in Lincoln that somebody in Michigan just created, right? You can share that because a lot of people are generous with their activities, generous with their resources, and we are trying to provide that exchange.
Okay. So when it comes to, because you have yourself experience in curriculum development, so I'm asking now with your current role, okay, how can you assist a faculty member who want to develop the curriculum and include all these things that we have talked about?
We have met with several schools to provide them kind of in-person consultation on curriculum development. We also have access to a lot of data as well from the employers too, so we can provide some data, such as I brought something today to give to all of you, which is competency framework that AICPA&CIMA recently developed. So I will leave it for you to pass around as well. So those kind of things where we take big data and we combine so you don't have to. But at the same time, if you want some advice on how to build your curriculum, or better yet, how other people did it and it succeeded, because I always think in life, like if you're going through something, somebody already went through that and wrote a book about it. Go buy it and read it so you don't have to wonder, right? So we kind of trying to do the same thing.
Thank you.
So we spoke about educators and academics, but what about industry practitioners who are in academia. So how, for example, accounting professionals and practitioners can contribute potentially to your AICPA programs? So
to AICPA, not
Yeah.
to students. To students, bring color to the material, right?
To
That's
your
kind of
programs, yeah.
But to the programs,
Can we be involved somehow?
yes,
If there are
yes,
industry
we
practitioners?
love that, right? That's what we want. We want the best practices. We want innovative strategies on how to teach. You know, something you did that was cool and it worked and it created a lot of excited students. Tell us, and we'll tell everybody. So you can write an article, you can write a blog, you can be a speaker at my faculty hour webcast. You can volunteer. I am a staff liaison for a group of volunteers, 15 of them every year, Academic Executive Committee, which is 75% academics, 25% practitioners, where we get them to discuss all of the initiatives, what's worth it, what's not worth it. So there are a lot of ways. I brought my business card, so take that to email me if you want to. I'll put you all to work.
Okay.
Thank you. And the next question, I think probably my favorite question from today, because we spoke about past and, you know, reflected on your experience and our experience, but let's talk about future and future of business education, accounting education. Can you think about the most significant challenges and opportunities you see as, you know, for the business education, accounting education for the next 5 years?
That's a loaded question right there. How much time do we have? Yes, and I think there are challenges, and at the same time, they present opportunities if we just don't sit and look at them, we just do something. I'm a doer, you can tell. But technological innovation is the biggest thing. That's not news to anybody. Artificial intelligence, robots, does that provide an opportunity? Yes. My August faculty hour, I have an academic, Wendy Teets, who's talking about using ChatGPT in education. Like, she figured it out already. Like, she's always on the, you know, forefront of these things. And then I said, come and tell everybody. So in August, we're going to have a discussion on that, a big discussion on how to use it, how to make your life easier, and how to teach students to use it responsibly too. So there is something that looks like a challenge, but again, if you react in time or proact in time, you use it as an opportunity too. We have regulatory challenges coming our way as well, because we used to report on dollars, and now we are going to report on other things such as environmental impact, right? Those are not dollars, those are units of carbon dioxide, right? So is it a challenge? Yes. Are we all, natural scientists? No. But are we smart enough to talk to them? Yes. Do we have a mindset of an auditor where we do not take any numbers for granted and we find the source document that shows us that that number is correct before it's published to the... Yes. So this is a whole new opportunity. It's going to be a huge business for, all those accounting firms that are trying to figure it out right now, right? But again, it's like, do it but some firms say, well, we need frameworks. I'm like, there are some frameworks. Go start, and if you know something better in a year, do something better in a year. 5 years ago, I remember that was very funny. When I worked 6 years ago, when I worked in the corporation, our senior management decided to issue an environmental report because all the investors wanted to see it. It was a 2-pager, and you open it up and it said how much water we poisoned and how much, gases and I got it in my hands, and I was the managing internal audit at that point when it was published. It was already published. It went to the investors. And I said, who wrote this? And they said, well, we got the numbers from Anatoly in facilities. Not only did anybody verify any of these numbers, were they all on a napkin before you published it? It was pretty much like that because there was no regulation around it, right? And now there is regulation that's coming that's going to be very strict around those rules. And this is, again, a huge opportunity for us.
Okay. We're going to end the session with one question. I'm going to combine them. So it's going to be the advice you have for one, the accounting students or students in general, and the ones you have for faculty members. So what advice would you give to an accounting student who are aspiring to pursue a successful career in the field? And what advice will you give to the educators who aim to effectively prepare their students?
Okay. So for students first, right? Basics first. We still need to be technical experts. So one homework at a time, get the basics done. So you still need to have technical knowledge. But then take it a step further. How do you distinguish yourself among everybody who knows the technical stuff, right? You get a credential. You become a niche expert in something that not everybody is an expert in, right? Get a credential in cybersecurity. Get a credential in ESG. Get a credential in data analytics. Something that interests you, right? So first you get the basics and then you get that extra up. And then, as I mentioned, those power skills, those leadership skills are going to give you wings to fly. This is how I describe it to my students. I say, not being afraid of numbers is superpower, right? Getting a credential is that big S on your chest that everybody knows that you have that superpower. And then if you have those leadership skills, if you know how to think critically and question the information you're receiving and how to get the data from it, if you know how to communicate, if you're agile, if you have digital mindset and you know that there's got to be a software that does it already, those are the wings that will make you fly. So that's my advice to students. And I think my advice to the faculty is the same. So have a beginner mind as well in everything you do. First of all, we are in the profession where we have to be lifelong learners or we will become irrelevant very quickly because the world changes very quickly. Business world is changing very quickly. Everything that touches business is changing very quickly. I feel like the degree that I got in the 90s, is outdated because I was prepared. I always joke about it. We were installing the software called email in my university, right? That was cutting edge at the time. That was short 25, 30 years ago. So now we're talking about much different things. So if I don't keep up, I will stay in the 80s and the 90s. And there is no value to students right now from me, right? Because I am not with the business world right now. So keep up to date and keep challenging yourself, right? You're always learning. I think you're all university professors because you love learning too, not just teaching. So we always learn something as well. So keep yourself on the edge of things as well.
Thank you very much. That had brought us to the end of our session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we open the floor to any questions from the audience. And
yes, thank you very much, Anne. I really enjoyed this talk, and I certainly appreciate this kind of global perspective you have brought to our international business school. I really like the risk-taking part. I really like, how you recognize the technology, especially the AI impact in our different sectors, and also the students' learning and organizational sort of, changes. And you clearly recognize the risks as well as the, the challenges, limitations, plus the strength. We should not shy away from trying things out. However, along with the softer skills, which one of the data I remembered is McKinsey's 56 different foundation skills that they conducted a survey across 13 countries, over 18,000 participants, and they classified the skills into 4 different categories: cognitive, digital, entrepreneurial, and the self-leadership. But along all these skills, now in 2023, we are facing another challenge, which is the artificial intelligence, which previously already existed, but then now is free for everyone to use. Now, whilst we can promote all these really good practices and then integrating this part of the skills along with the soft skills in our training, staff development, and then create future workforce, the challenges, the regulatory, the whole framework globally, we are facing exactly the same challenges, as in the authenticity, the ethical practice, all these issues. So how would you address these gaps, these challenges, along with opportunities?
You know, we should have mentioned ethics because it's a big part of our profession as well. So everything has to permeate, you know, the basics. Ethics becomes the basis of everything as well. And it is a challenge that we're rumbling on, and I won't pretend that I know all the answers to that, right? We are all kind of in this boat together, and we are experimenting, right? And we're tripping and falling maybe, and then getting up and experimenting again. So this is going to be something that I cannot predict right now. Ask me in a couple of years, but it's going to be huge, right? It's going to affect everything that we do, and we have to be able to be agile enough to react and not let it consume us, but to use it for good.
Totally. And I think with the integration of soft skills, earlier we asked questions about how do we assess the evidence, how do we actually identify these evidence. Whilst these skills can be evidenced, the authenticity sometimes is that kind of, you know, authentication. We still have a big question mark. Not saying that, you know, everyone would be, how to say, using the AI to replace the human intelligence. But on the other hand, I think we definitely have to take cautious steps whilst using, obviously, artificial intelligence responsibly.
Absolutely. We have, just an anecdote, we have a foundation. That's okay. We have a foundation that gives scholarships to students, about $1 million every year for students to teach, to learn accounting. And we have about 1,000 applications, and a quarter of them had written essays using ChatGPT this year.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
So we're not alone.
We're not alone, right? Because they all look the same. Like, you know, there's a certain structure, and the person who was managing the application process was scratching his head. We all were, right? What do you do with that?
And I think on top of that, another layer is the GDPR, which is the data privacy, data protection. So earlier you mentioned about databases. Now all these databases are widely available in some free sources, but then in terms of the corporate, in terms of the organization, how far, if the framework is not there, if the regulatory policies and the guidance are not there, how can organizations guarantee their employee not feeding this data into some free platforms and then generating some sort of, you know, questionable outcomes, which will be very challenging for any organization to handle.
Absolutely. There are definitely fresh challenges for regulators as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you.
One question from me.
Okay.
It's very interesting to listen from you. One aspect we struggle is because we understand the importance of soft skills, you know, employee skills, for example, but the students don't understand it, right? And how do you motivate them? Because my students, they don't interact much. When I ask them questions, not many students are kind of courageous enough to answer the questions, and then you need to sort of organize various sessions, employee, you know, sessions and stuff like that. Not many students attend. From their point of view, they think like, oh, I paid the fees, give me the degree. So how do you have any tips for us to sort of teach these kind of things?
Student engagement, right, is a huge challenge for a lot of professors now since COVID too, most of the time. Let me hide under my blanket and give me a degree 4 years later. So we are struggling with that too, and we are turning to gamification for everything. we are turning to how do you, it's a whole new generation. That was the revelation of the last month for us, that we cannot teach this generation the way we were taught, because we're a different generation. So when we were sitting in the lecture hall taking notes from the lecturer, that doesn't work anymore, right? Nobody's taking notes. Nobody reads textbooks, right? This is a whole different generation. We have research now out there for Generation Z and how to interact with them. That's a thing. It's a different brain set too, but gamification is one of the things. So I remember I turned my quizzes into Kahoot, and they were competing with each other when I could not get anybody to ask me any questions or answer. I would call on people. They would get uncomfortable, but they would, oh, that's okay. They would have to answer. Nice to meet you. But turning it into a competitive game somehow involves them. And we're going to have a webcast on that too. So every time I pick up like a good nugget of information that I think other people could use, I turn it into a webcast and bring people. So there's going to be a webcast on gamification and how different people use that to engage their students, because it's definitely you're not the only one, so don't take it personally. They do not answer anybody.
An organized accounting quiz, students could get cash prizes as well, for cash prizes. Now only 20-30% students were interested, rest the entire not at all. So this is a different kind of challenge, because us understanding the importance of them students learning certain skills, so that when they go back to the workplace, they can become success with that example. But students not taking on board, for example, from their point of view, what I think is getting a degree is important, getting good grades is important, but I want to get the grades, and then if something is not coming in the exams or any assessment, for example, if these things are not assessed, I don't want to learn or I don't want to attend these sessions kind of thing. That's the mindset.
Yes.
Which in my opinion is a kind of problem. So
I'll tell you a couple more things. My 11-year-old challenges that he has to learn geometry because it's not going to be useful to him, right? Like at that age, he's like, I want to learn how to file my taxes because that's more of a useful life skill. At 11-year-old, he wants to know, why does he have to learn this? So there is a new generation where you have to show why you have to learn this and how it's going to help you. And I had several faculty in my program where they would bring things from their work, because they were professionals that were teaching at night, from their board meetings, and they would show it to the students, and they would say, we were arguing about this today at work, and this is, we have SOX compliance, this is big internal control thing, that regulation, and he's like, and this is why it's important that we learn this, because the board of directors challenges us on everything. So showing them why, I think, is one of the things that came up in a research on current generation. Like, why do I have to learn this? How is that going to help me? How is it going to help in my future? So those kind of things, I think, will help, but it's definitely a struggle.
I think Stephanie was first, and then
Stephanie.
Hi, thank you. Lovely presentation. I particularly like the idea of renaming it power skills. I'm going to use that and steal your analogy of Superman as well. My question actually dovetails quite well with Taka, because you're focusing on the students, whereas mine's looking at the academics. So how would you respond to academics who say that there isn't any room in the curriculum for these soft skills, because maybe it's too full of the professional qualification requirements? How do you address that?
Those, again, soft power, leadership, life skills are not a separate thing. They are, I think, integrated in what we do. For example, like I mentioned, doing the cultural research with the person from that culture already teaches you the skills of global awareness when you're working with that person. Doing a case with the person from business teaches you the business communication and how it should be done. Doing the presentation on what you did and trying to explain it to people, maybe it's technical presentation, maybe it's not technical presentation, but that teaches you those skills that you can, they're transferable, right? We talked about those transferable skills. You can talk about the same, I can talk about equity-based compensation right now to you, the way I can talk about global awareness in business as well. So those skills are transferable between industries. You can talk about technical things, you can talk about non-technical things. So you integrate those skills. And I think some of the leadership, you know, it takes some innovative, like you break them up into groups and you say, you're going to be the partner and you're going to be the associate this case. And then in the next case, you switch roles and he has to review what you did and she has to review what you did. So you give them those roles to play and they can prepare. And actually that brings me to another of my point, because I wanted to talk about ethics. The fact that you have to talk about ethics in everything you talk about. What can go wrong and what would you say? Like sometimes it gets to this bottom thing. Like if somebody asks you to do something that you're not comfortable with, what are the words that are going to come out of your mouth? Let's practice them. Let's practice them. How do you say, I'm uncomfortable doing this? Because otherwise it's theory. Oh, ethics, right? But you bring it to a practical thing and you do a little bit of a role play and you make them think. When my supervisor, whom I respect and love, asks me to do something that makes me feel uncomfortable, what are the words I'm going to use to express this discomfort? You're not going to point fingers and yell, you're unethical and this is wrong and we're not going to do this. But what are the words that are going to be there? So doing this role play, practicing those words, I think is a great skill, because next time something like that happens, those words will come back to them and they will be strong enough because they will hear your voice in their head and they will say, you know, you're there.
Ryan?
It's funny because my question relates to, it's slightly different, but it relates to both of those. But it puts the emphasis more on the professional body, because I've actually been doing something today around trying to be innovative in my own module. However, I am, in my opinion, stymied by the professional bodies. CIMA probably the least, but it's very, I teach a taxation module, and to get the exemptions currently of the main bodies that we would have, all of you require that I have at least 50% exam, so my assessment is dictated to, and even for ACCA, I have to cover 80% of the coverage of like 4 major taxes plus compliance. So and what I'm trying to do is implement, my other assessment is, I'm going for a group, so that's collaboration, presentation, using AI with a reflective element. But those skills need teaching. And again, I appreciate you've just said that it's possible, but I even put some of this across to another professor from another department, and she's like, this is so much. But my response is, but that is what I'm limited to, because those all of our third year modules have exemptions. They all have those rigid barriers. And I still want, I tell my students, I go further, I say 25% is technical, 75% is soft skills. But at the minute, the barrier to me is the actual professional bodies. Now, I will admit, it isn't CIMA. I think they are the ones that are being more rounded around how we teach in the future, but they still do have some limitations. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of the responsibility of what your thoughts on the responsibility of the professional bodies to change with the times as much as we do. Because at the minute, it feels like we're trying to be this person that is the adage, you give someone a fish, they feed themselves for a day, you teach them to fish, they feed themselves for a lifetime. I feel like we're trying that. I'm not sure all of the professional bodies are quite on board, and it's very difficult without, that's a very accountancy specific thing. But the person from the other department was absolutely shocked when I said, I'm trying to do these skill-based things, I think they're really important, but this is the coverage of technical content I still have to have. And it's so difficult right now in accountancy education specifically.
It's so much. It's so much of the technical coverage right now, right? Because the regulations grew like 100 times in the last 30 years. So, and nobody taping, right? I'll give you a little secret. It takes 2 years for the exam, like we have the CPA exam, right, to change its content. So they just changed it. We are starting a new CPA exam in January 2024. Took about 3 years to get to that point. And it's going to be more specialized than it ever was before because they're realizing nobody can fit that much information into their brain. So there, instead of 4 parts, there's going to be 6 parts, and 3 are mandatory, but then you choose one, what your 4th part is going to be. It's more of a discipline specialty. It's either taxes, systems, or financial reporting. So it took 3 years to get to that. And now people are looking around and saying, what about ESG? Where is that on the exam? Oh, we didn't think of that 3 years ago. So let's start over. And in 3 years, that's going to be on the exam, on the credential exam, right? But then in 3 years, it's going to be something else, right? What about the chips in the brain thing? Or whatever we come up with next. So it's definitely a challenge to have the professional bodies. They're supposed to be, maneuverous, but there is so much that goes on. It's like a research project. They have to interview 400 people. They have to have 400 focus groups. What should be on the exam? Then they have to process all that data. Then they have to create questions around that data. Then they have to test the questions around the data. 3 years later, what about ESG? So you drop the professional bodies.
When I first joined, it's really funny, I was very highly exemption based because I'm an accountant, I got the degree, and it's very important. Now I've been here 3 years and teaching, I would happily drop. If it wasn't such a marketing tool at times and a thing to get students in the door, I would happily drop them as they are. Obviously, if they maneuvered themselves into a slightly more flexible manner, then yes, I'll keep them. But as they are, I would drop them tomorrow so that I could do things that would actually probably be more beneficial from employability. But it just feels like in accounting education, I'm like in a box and I just kind of go to one barrier and then bounce off that one and hit another barrier.
Yes.
And hit another barrier.
It is a challenge. And to add to that, not everything you can test. Again, right? The exam has its limitations. How am I going to test robotic process automation on the exam? Or even Excel. Like, I cannot use Excel on the exam, but every customer uses Excel. So there is certain exams cannot test your knowledge of AI or your presentation skills, right? Because it's a computerized exam. So there are limitations on the exam too. So we have this unique challenge in how we introduce the technical that fits into the exam, and then the wider range, right? The wider range. And I think you're on the right track. You just have to keep bouncing.
So
sorry, Ryan.
let's take last 2 questions. Nikki first and then Anna. So Nikki.
Okay.
Firstly, thank you for mentioning ESG as Programme Leader at the MSc Governance here at Lincoln. It's great to be thinking about the importance of it and how it's developing. But my question was that you mentioned the importance of good grammar and appropriately written emails, which I find a lot with students. What are they saying in this email? What are they asking me? Things like that. I think we've got a generation who's been brought up with Snapchat, Twitter, emojis are positively hieroglyphic, some of these students. So I wondered if you've got any tips for how we can get across the importance of good grammar and good formatting in emails without us coming across as dinosaurs. Because sometimes that's how I feel when I say, this is not a proper email, go away and come back.
I do not have a better answer than that. I used to return it and I say, return to me something that makes sense. And maybe we are dinosaurs, but so are their employers, right? So right now, maybe in 20 years, they will be all emojiing each other at work. And that will be fine. But right now, they will have to go work for the same dinosaurs as we are. So they have to have the skills to communicate to them whatever it is that, trying to express. So I am perfectly fine to put it back. I correct my daughter. She doesn't like it. She rolls her eyes. But, I say, you and I, not you and me, and things like that. And this is the apostrophe. And but there's no punctuations in texts, right? I have no idea where the sentence begins or ends. And the emojis is a manner of speaking. But now it's professional. It is your responsibility to be the dinosaur because you are the step between the peers and the employers. Let them trip over you first before they lose their job over it.
Thank you. And Anna.
Anna, thank you so much for this inspiring talk and discussion. My question is quite simple, actually. I just wanted to maybe hear your point from the professional body and primarily from AICPA, how this body can help our students stand out of the crowd, and how and should it be done together with university, or should we do this like in parallel? We're doing our job, AICPA does his job, or should we go together, and what can we do just to make them exceptional by the time when they go out to the job market?
That's a great question, because we could. From what I have learned, I've been with the association for 3 years now, and I'm looking at the resources that the association provides with the eye of a professor that I was only 3 years ago. So I thought I could do a great job preparing my students, right? But the employers do not know that I'm a fantastic professor. Right? They will not have it on their resume that they took a class with a fantastic professor like Ryan. But what they will see, if Ryan incorporates some kind of AI certificate into his program and they put it on their resume, the employers will see not only they took a class with Ryan, but they took robotic process automation certificate from a professional body. Because we do have those certificates like learning products for experienced CPAs and CIMAs, because we want them to be always upskilled. And what I just had a discussion with my VP recently, he said, well, all of our certificates and our learning products are designed for more seasoned professionals, he said to me. And I said, you know what, Mike? Your seasoned professional doesn't know much more about cybersecurity than a high school graduate right now. They are on the same level. So that certificate can be incorporated into the student's curriculum, and that module becomes the certificate. We have several schools in the US that do that right now. Essentially, they don't teach cybersecurity. For that piece of the curriculum, they say, go complete the cybersecurity certificate from AICPA. They get a grade for it, right? Because it's part of the grade. And then at the same time, it gives the students cyber certificate security from AICPA on their resume. So that's how we as a corporate body try to work with academics to give their students a heads up or, you know, a distinguishing mark on their resume and make them more noticeable in this marketplace, more employable. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. On this note, I think we would say thank you to Anna for a wonderful, wonderful presentation and talk with us today. So
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
thank you so much.